Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am Adria Crutchfield, the Executive Director of the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership. Thank you. It's wonderful to see all your beautiful faces this evening as we gather to reflect on the origins of a concerted effort of Black residents of Baltimore's public housing and a group of concerned civil rights advocates, attorneys, and others who joined them to support the lawsuit brought by the ACLU of Maryland on their behalf, and to relay the progress made over the last 25 years. I'm a newcomer to Baltimore. I was raised in the Midwest, and I later lived in Washington, D.C. and Brooklyn, New York. I was first in this fabulous space last fall to see an incredible play called Thoughts of a Colored Man, and I'm so thrilled to return tonight for this occasion. Thank you to the Center Stage team for hosting us tonight. BRHP, the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, is a 501c3 that administers the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program within resource-rich areas of the city and the 5 surrounding counties. But what does that mean? In simple terms, we serve as a partner to the Housing Authority of Baltimore City through a subcontract to provide rental assistance and housing counseling supports to over 4,300 families. We help them access communities that are safe, healthy, and economically vibrant. The families we serve have young children, earn wages of approximately $16,000 annually, and pay up to 30% of their income towards rent. Our counseling services consist of workshops to prepare families for leasing in the private rental market, search assistance to help them find a community and home that best meets their needs, and then a continued connection over 2 years to ensure a successful tenancy. That is by far the heaviest lifting we do. That's not all we do. We also collaborate with other public housing authorities in the region to help add new affordable housing developments to the rental stock through the administration of the project-based vouchers. We share our expertise in voucher administration and housing counseling with other jurisdictions across the country that are interested in launching housing mobility programs of their own through a consortium called Mobilityworks, practitioners and policy advocates, some of whom are here tonight. I want to especially shout out to our sister programs, Housing Choice Partners in Chicago, led by Andrea Jurasek, and Inclusive Community Projects, the Inclusive Communities Project in Dallas, led by Demetria McCain. She couldn't be here tonight, but we can clap it up for her too. And we lend our knowledge and the experience of our clients and property partners to advance legislative proposals that align with our mission of expanding housing choices for families with low incomes and ultimately foster the creation of more diverse, safe, healthy, and economically vibrant communities. We do all this work with a caring, sharp, and dedicated staff, without whom BRHP's success would be impossible. Please join me in applause to express gratitude for current and former staff and their tireless efforts. I appreciate them deeply. In addition to the staff, we could not do this work without strong partners, past and present. Thank you to our co-hosts this evening, the ACLU of Maryland, led by Ms. Dana Vickers-Shelley. She's here tonight. I want to also acknowledge Janet Abrahams, President and CEO of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. I'd like to recognize current and former members of the BRHP Board of Directors. If you all could stand if you are a current or a former board member. Wonderful. And additionally, I'd like to recognize these folks. I'd also ask you to stand and remain standing until I get through this short list. Judge Marvin Garbus, who presided over the lawsuit. The original plaintiffs of the lawsuit. If you are here tonight, Doris Tinsley and others, please stand. As well as defendants from the city and HUD, Pat Payne, Paul Graziano, Amy Wilkinson, Melody Taylor, Carol Payne. If you all heard your name, you should stand. Thank you. Current and former staff from the ACLU and NAACP Legal Defense Fund. If you're former staff of the ACLU or current staff, ACLU, LDF, in the house, Ajmel, great to see you. We'd like to also recognize the ABLE Foundation, who funded the litigation. So if you're here from the ABLE Foundation, please stand. And then Metropolitan Baltimore Quadell, led by Jim Evans. I believe I saw Jim earlier. I want to also acknowledge our 2,000 plus property partners who provide quality housing to our 4,300 families. And speaking of our families, many are in the audience, and we thank them for their presence and their bold commitment to better futures. So give it up for our families. We are grateful for the generous sponsorship of PNC Bank and CR of Maryland that helped to make this evening possible. And I want to give a special thanks to those who helped in the planning and execution of tonight's event, especially BRHP board members Ann Perkins, Barbara Samuels, Iris Bradford, Zelda Talley, and my colleagues Tiffany Long and Tiara Haley. Thank you all. Could not do this without all of these folks. This work is not easy. The work of meeting the needs of those trying to survive some of society's harshest situations is important, and it is urgent. Having been raised by a single mother who supported her 2 biracial daughters by working 3 jobs, I know the feelings of having to endure racial discrimination, intimate partner abuse, scarcity, and stress personally. And I also know the benefits of having a stable home in which to eat family meals, complete challenging homework assignments, rest peacefully at night. The benefits of a safe neighborhood to play outdoors with friends, the benefits of being raised in a racially diverse environment. My mother, like many of the mothers BRHP serves, made sacrifices to provide a high quality of life for her children and see their full potential realized. Later, you'll hear in greater detail how the services that BRHP offers can be transformative. I encourage you to join this conversation online throughout the evening by using our hashtag Thompson25. But first, a reflection on how this all came to be 25 years ago. Please join me now in welcoming the chair of the BRHP Board of Directors, who has faithfully served the organization in this capacity for 8 years, Andrew Freeman.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out. I'm Andy Freeman. I have been the board chair for not quite 8 years, and I am finally being paroled. In just a couple weeks, you'll hear it later on from Josh Sivan, who has agreed to take my place. I had the privilege a little over 20 years ago. I wasn't actually there at the conception of the Thompson case, but a little over 20 years ago, I joined Barbara Samuels for 2 purposes. One, we had a race to try to get the partial consent decree at least started before it was supposed to be finished. And Judge Garbus set a very firm deadline. He wanted some families to move by Christmas of 2000 and, Barbara, help me, 2001? 5? Anyway, we got it done. He did threaten to hold Commissioner Graziano in contempt, and Commissioner Graziano came through for us. Tonight, I actually don't want to share too many war stories. I want to first recognize, Adria recognized a bunch of the folks. I just want to recognize a couple more. So first of all, Barbara Samuels, who really has shepherded this case from start to finish, and has really been the personification and the moving force behind all of it. I want to call out 2 other people who get a little less recognition, but deserve a lot more. One is Susan Gehring, who was the head of the Maryland ACLU actually before Barbara was there. And Susan came here with the vision to bring both this suit and the Bradford suit again for adequate school funding, and had the vision to get these lawsuits up and running to really enable huge systemic change. So I want to thank Susan for having the vision of getting it started. Adria mentioned the ABLE Foundation, but Bob Embry, really uniquely among the foundation leaders that I'm familiar with, had the vision to realize that foundations, instead of just giving small or even large grants to try to affect change, can use litigation as a method of affecting change, and was a huge supporter of this lawsuit throughout, and I think can justly claim that many hundreds, maybe millions of dollars that the ABLE Foundation invested in this lawsuit has been multiplied hundreds or thousands of times into what will be well over $1 billion in federal assistance to our families, which is just a huge multiplier effect that I know Bob and the foundation are proud of, but I really do encourage anybody else here who has any influence in the foundation community to think about funding lawsuits not as a first resort, but as an alternative resort to affect change. So thank you, Bob. Adria mentioned the clients. I actually want to call out their names just because it really did take real courage for them in 1995 to step forward and put their names on this lawsuit. They're not here today. I don't think Ms. Tinsley was going to try to be here, but I haven't seen her. You are here. So, woo, thank you. Oh, okay. Doris Tinsley, who's been here from start to finish for 25 years, so one thing that Barbara was always great at was involving both the clients and the steering committee. This was not a lawyer-driven lawsuit. Barbara made sure that all of us listened to and got to know the clients and the tenants, which had a huge effect on it. But in addition to Ms. Tinsley, Carmen Thompson is the woman who the case is named for, Rhonda Harris, Joanne Boyd, Ike Neal, and Lorraine Johnson, who passed away a number of years ago, but all of whom stayed involved throughout the case. So as I said, rather than sharing war stories about the lawsuit itself, I thought I would read from one of my favorite documents from the lawsuit, which is Congressman Cummings' declaration in support of the settlement. And we all missed Congressman Cummings tremendously. I will not in any way, shape, or form try to embody his presence or his voice, but I will read his words, or some of his words, in support of the settlement. He wrote in part, "The Baltimore Housing Mobility Program permits many poor African Americans to have the same choices about where to raise their children as others in the Baltimore region, a truly empowering consequence of this litigation. I applauded this court's 2005 ruling, recognizing that a regional approach to fair housing is essential to overcoming the Baltimore region's legacy of segregation and the government policies that contributed to it. The settlement agreement is a significant step toward remedying the Fair Housing Act violations that the court has found. The settlement agreement will provide needed resources to continue the successful and nationally recognized Baltimore Housing Mobility Program, launched under the partial consent decree in this case, which has already assisted more than 1,800 families who have voluntarily chosen to live in better neighborhoods that offer improved educational and economic opportunities." He went on and described a number of the benefits of the program, but then emphasized that its benefits are not limited to families who participate. Rather, the program strengthens the entire Baltimore region. Finally, Congressman Cummings concluded, "The inspiring stories of participants in the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program echo my own family's journey decades ago, when we were able to move from an impoverished neighborhood near the Raven Stadium to a community of far greater opportunity in Edmondson Village in West Baltimore. That move opened my eyes to a better world. We were the first black family on our street, and I had the opportunity to attend integrated and high-quality public schools where I was inspired to excel. It is not an exaggeration to say that the housing moves that my family made were critical to the tremendous opportunities I have had in my life, culminating in my service to the people of Maryland in the practice of law, the Maryland legislature, and the United States House of Representatives. It is my hope and belief that the settlement agreement in this case will provide similar opportunities to thousands of families." I'm confident that he's right. I'm confident that one or more of the children who have moved under this program will be the next generation of Congressman Cummingses. Tonight, we will hear the stories from some of the families whose lives have been affected by the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program. We will learn about some of the research on the effects of housing mobility and efforts to take housing mobility throughout the country. And we'll hear from some staff who can talk and share more about the program and its successes and where we're headed. Before we do all of that, shortly, I wanted to introduce Ryan Downer, one of my colleagues on the board. He said he was one of my colleagues in the lawsuit when he was a very young lawyer. He was an important part of our team in the remedies portion of the case. He served on the board ever since as our secretary and in other roles, and he is currently the director of litigation at the Civil Rights Corps in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Welcome and good evening. My name is Ryan Downer, and as Andy said, I'm a board member of BRHP and was privileged to be a young attorney on the litigation team that finally settled Thompson v. HUD in 2012, some 17 years after it was filed. And just to give you a sense of how long that is, I was in middle school when Thompson was filed. Sorry, Barbara. And yet I was at the final settlement meeting, and that was a tremendous moment for me in my career. My family didn't benefit from the Thompson settlement, but I certainly appreciate the opportunities that it provides on a deep, visceral level. that's because the issues in the Thompson case are deeply personal to me. My father grew up in the old Lexington Terrace low-rises, not too far from here, and my mother grew up a few blocks west of Sandtown. And it's only because of the hard-fought opportunities that they were able to seize for themselves that I'm in a position to be up here on this stage. I know from my family's own experience how vital BRHP's work is, and it's important for us to recognize people who make it possible for us to do that work and who help to shape a world where our families can succeed. So at this time in our program, we're going to honor a few community leaders with awards in the categories of Partner of Excellence and Trailblazer. BRHP has over 2,000 property owners participating in the Housing Mobility Program. These landlords are obviously key to our success, and today we want to honor one who has stood out over the years for their reputation of going above and beyond in their commitment to providing our families affordable, safe, and quality housing. CR of Maryland is a full-service real estate company founded by Craig Rich in 2012. During the company's tenure, they have serviced investors, retail buyers, and sellers. In 2016, Craig invited his son Brock to join the company, and CR of Maryland refocused their goals on increasing the supply and quality of housing for low-income families in the Baltimore metropolitan area. With this new focus, CR of Maryland has been able to help nearly 200 families in the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program find a place to call home. And I had a chance to chat with Craig before this event. He tells me that Brock is the heart and soul of that effort, and he told me that he has passion for what we do, but that Brock is the one who's doing the work. And I find that extraordinary. They're an extraordinary family. CR of Maryland also makes an effort to stay involved in the community beyond their housing efforts by supporting neighborhood associations, local schools, and other nonprofit organizations. For its steadfast partnership and commitment to providing excellent service and housing, we present the BRHP Partner of Excellence Award to our partner, CR of Maryland. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Please welcome Brock to the stage to accept the award on behalf of CR of Maryland.
Thank you. On behalf of myself, Craig, and everyone at CR of Maryland, I'd like to sincerely thank the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership for recognizing us. I did not expect or anticipate to ever receive acknowledgement for our work with the program, and I'm honored that we are here today. Well, thanks. When Adria let us know that we could say a few remarks tonight, I knew that there were two groups of people that I wanted to recognize myself: the program's participants and the employees. These are the people that make BRHP the special organization that it is. I wanted to share 3 interactions that I've had with program participants that have stood out to me over the last couple years. I spoke with each of these women this week to confirm it was okay for me to talk, and also to thank them because they've helped shape my view of what BRHP is. The first instance is with Miss Renee Littlejohn. I met Renee. She was our first ever BRHP participant that we leased to. She viewed a house that was not in an opportunity area, and she knew that going into it, but I told her that the house that was an opportunity area had the same finishings of this one. We finished the tour, and I started talking to the next family that had walked in, and I noticed that Miss Renee was still standing on the front porch after about 10 minutes, typing something on her phone. And a few more minutes later, she came back into the home to let me know she had completed her application for the other home she had not seen yet and was excited to move forward. Renee is still in that home today. The second instance that stood out was a tour I went on with Miss Melina Hill. I met her around Christmas 2016. We were driving from home to home in a neighborhood, and as we were going to each home, she was becoming super enthusiastic about the Christmas lights that were in the neighborhood. And she kept saying how excited her kids would be seeing all the Christmas lights and how she could not wait to decorate. We also talked about how she was going to set up her Ravens gear in the basement in what we called her woman cave. Miss Hill's also still in that house. The last example I wanted to bring up was a resident, Miss Keisha Patterson. I worked for weeks with Miss Patterson finding the right home. And about 6 months after moving, I was just chatting with her, checking in. And I asked her how everything was going in the new house. And she immediately talked about how much she loved the home, but more importantly, how she loved her street and her neighbors. She went on about how friendly everyone was and how it reminded her of where she grew up in the Carolinas. Like everyone else, she also still was in that property. That brings me to the employees. The employees of BRHP are the ones that keep everything on track. The participants' excitement and eagerness for lease-up are a byproduct of the work that is done up front by the employees. They're a really special group of people, and I want to recognize a few that myself and the company have worked closely with over the last few years. I hope some or all of them are here. First, Mr. Bernard Jones. Your passion for the program and the families is infectious. Thank you for showing me and the company the ropes as we were becoming familiar with the program. Miss Lisa Wright, I saw her in the back. Miss Crystal Phillips and Mr. Robert Leidy and the rest of the inspection teams. Wow, we've had countless interactions, some of them more passionate than others. But you guys do a great job of balancing the responsibility of servicing the tenants while also communicating and working with the property partners, so thank you. Fashonda Walton and Sheila Pirano, thank you for always being the go-tos. I feel like we go to you when we don't know who else to talk to, so thank you. And I feel sometimes the less we interact, the better things are running. So I think that's a testament to you and your team, so thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank Pete Symbolic and Adria Crutchfield. Whether it's showing up to a community meeting or listening to a random idea, Pete's always goes out of his way to accommodate me. And then Adria, your drive and energy are impressive, and I'm glad we've been able to connect over the last few months. I want to thank everyone again. And hope for the best for the program, the families, and the employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Brock, for that, and thank you, Craig and CR of Maryland, for the incredible work you do and the extraordinary family that you are. Our next honoree has dedicated his career to fighting on the front lines of education reform to make the system more equitable and ensure all students, including ours, have an opportunity to succeed. As the president and CEO of the Education Trust, John B. King Jr. works to identify and close opportunity and achievement gaps from preschool through college. Prior to this role, King served in President Obama's cabinet as the 10th Secretary of Education. In tapping him for that role, President Obama called King an exceptionally talented educator, citing his commitment to preparing every child for success and his lifelong dedication to education as a teacher, principal, and leader of school systems. During Howard County's historic and, as some of you know very well, controversial school redistricting process last year, to reduce overcrowding and desegregate schools, Mr. King was a vocal proponent of the process, sharing with educators the link between equity, affordable housing, and school systems. In speaking about the process, King stated, "We know going to diverse schools helps low-income students and students of color achieve a higher level, but it also helps affluent students to be exposed to diverse perspectives and diverse experiences." This has proven true for BRHP families. Nearly 60% of the approximately 14,000 people that BRHP serves are children in primary or secondary schools, and they are transitioning from neighborhoods with an average poverty rate of roughly 37% to neighborhoods with an average poverty rate of less than 8%. Enrolling in high-performing schools changes the trajectory of these students immensely. Mr. King, we thank you for centering children in your work and for championing an equitable education for children like those in our program, for inspiring the next generation of education leaders with your bold leadership, and for your advocacy to create an educational system that provides opportunities for all students. We honor you with the BRHP Trailblazer Award. Please welcome Mr. King to the stage.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Adria, Andrew, and Ryan. Thank you to BRHP, and thank you really for the commitment of everyone in this room to the principle that housing policy is education policy. And what we know is that despite the fact that we are more than 65 years past the Brown versus Board of Education decision, we are still failing as a country to fulfill the promise of Brown. And this is a room of people that are organized to actually do something about that. So I'm proud to be here to celebrate you. I want to share three quick reflections. One, I do this work because of the difference schools made in my own life and my clear understanding that schools save lives. Both my parents passed away when I was a kid. My mom when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. And after my mom passed, it was just my dad and me. My dad was sick with undiagnosed Alzheimer's. So home was this place. I didn't know what my dad would be like from one night to the next. I didn't know what home would be like. As he got more and more sick, I took on more and more responsibility at home, figuring out how to get food in our house, figuring out how to keep our household going. The thing that saved me was a series of phenomenal public school teachers who invested in me, who gave me a sense of hope and possibility, who created a place at school where I could be a kid when I couldn't be a kid at home. Those are the stakes of educational opportunity. Right? School can be the difference between hope and despair in the life of a young person. But what we know is that too often our young people who are most vulnerable get less. Those who need the most get the least. Low-income students and students of color get less access to quality early childhood education, less access to resources, less access to the best prepared, diverse, strong teachers that they need, less access to advanced coursework, less access to school counselors, less access to support in the transition from K-12 to post-secondary opportunities. That's on us as a society. We have chosen to organize ourselves that way. But it doesn't have to be that way. Diverse schools create the opportunity to ensure that all students, regardless of race or income, are getting access to the resources they need to be successful. We know from decades of evidence that diverse schools produce better academic outcomes, particularly for low-income students and students of color. But we also know diverse schools help us to build a stronger society. We need all of our students to be prepared to succeed in a diverse higher ed experience, a diverse workforce, and ultimately a diverse civic life. We are all better off when we give those opportunities to all of our young people. And so I'll close with this thought. Too often people try to pit place-based work against mobility to opportunity work. We actually can't afford to choose between those. We have to choose both. We have to invest in every community. We have to make sure that every child grows up in housing conditions with access to health care and educational opportunity that we would want for any of our children. And at the same time, we have to break down the barriers of race and class that lock people out of opportunity. We need a both-and strategy. And so as I reflect on hearing the words of Congressman Cummings, I think about how often young people will look at folks like Congressman Cummings, those in his generation who led civil rights work. We'll think about Dr. King and his legacy and the civil rights work that he led. And young people often think to themselves, well, I'm not living at that time of a civil rights movement, so I can only imagine what I would have done then. But I would submit, when you look at the challenges we face as a country around issues of race, issues of class, issues of immigration, we don't have to ask what we would have done then. We have to ask each of us, we have to ask ourselves, what will we do now? Right? What is our responsibility to try to build a better society? And the legacy of Thompson, the legacy that we celebrate tonight, is a legacy of taking ownership of the responsibility we each bear to be warriors for civil rights, because that is how we deliver on the promise of America, the idea of equality of opportunity, the idea that every young person should get the quality education they need to be able to make of their lives what they will. Thank you for the opportunity to join you tonight, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. King, for your leadership and for your example. We're now going to move on to our community discussion. Please help me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Stephanie DeLuca, and our distinguished panelists to the stage.
What a pleasure to be here tonight. There's much to celebrate that brings us together from all different Baltimore and Baltimore regional neighborhoods. It's exciting to be here and kind of see everybody who was part of this case from the beginning come here and be in this moment that I think many of us can't believe is here. It's an extraordinary moment. So I was thinking a bit about how it is that I ended up here. I mean, we're going to talk to the real experts in a minute. There are a number of people I have to thank for the fact that I'm even here. So I would go back 23 years. I'm thinking back 23 years ago, and I'm in Chicago, and I meet Alex Polikoff and Jim Rosenbaum. I was a graduate student at Northwestern. I heard about the Gautreaux case, and Jim Rosenbaum was my PhD advisor and had seen the remedy to the Gautreaux case as a chance to understand better how important place is to families and children. And I was lucky enough to be there to meet Alex and to overhear about this extraordinary program that helped 7,000 African-American families move to neighborhoods that white families had always enjoyed. And I got a chance to learn about Alex's extraordinary journey to the Supreme Court. It's gratifying to be here today to see the legacy of so much of that work. I was able to get a chance back in 1997 to track families who were part of the Gautreaux remedy 15 to 20 years later. So there's that moment that I'm thinking about right now. I'm thinking about a moment 18 years ago when I was lucky enough to move to Baltimore, about 4 to 7 years after the Moving to Opportunity experiment had happened here. And a number of researchers and policymakers were trying to figure out, puzzling over some of the findings at that time. And I decided to get to know my new hometown of Baltimore by going out and talking to the families who are part of the Moving to Opportunity program here in Baltimore, and fell in love with my new hometown by going to many of the neighborhoods people had told me never to go to once I came here. And I was transformed as a scholar during this period of time on a number of levels. But I realized, as much as I love quantitative data, what I really love is talking to people and hearing stories. But more to the point, I began to really understand the expertise that families have, any of the recipients of policies that we hope to help, the expertise that lies in their experiences, and how vital it is to get that expertise and elevate it and then bring it to bear on policy moving forward. Which then brings me to a moment 15 years ago when Barbara Samuels called to me. I think I see Barbara right there. And I only now realize that she took quite a chance on such a young professor back then, and asked me, on the basis of this work I'd done on Gautreaux and on MTO, to be an expert witness in the remedial phase of the Thompson case. Luckily, I was on sabbatical at the time, so I had a little bit of extra time for what was about to become quite a journey. It was an honor to be part of the case and to learn so much about how significant courts are in upholding civil rights and also the limits of research. Where research ends and where social justice takes over. So I learned quite a bit during this period of time. I was also honored as the case moved forward and to be able to work with the Metropolitan Baltimore Quadell. I think I saw Jim there, and also Amy, and eventually the BRHP, and Allison, and Rachel Brash, and eventually Adria and Pete, to be able to conduct research and follow families in the Baltimore program. To understand more about what their lives are like, the intersection between the everyday lives of families and children that we hope to promote, and the policies are meant to promote them. So what is housing mobility? So I've learned from my many fair housing teachers like Barbara, Susan, Phil, Betsy, Mike, Alex, Florence, Josh, and Andy. It's about civil rights. And it's therefore about human rights. It's about protection from discrimination and the provision of equal opportunities. But it's also about specifically providing housing assistance so that families have choices about where to live and where to send their children to school, and about the opportunity that those neighborhoods and schools provide for their children that extend far beyond housing itself. And that's where the research comes in. So I can say confidently we have now 30 years worth of research that points to a compelling fact, that it's not just the family that a child is born into, but the neighborhood that she grows up in that helps shape her chances of social mobility. There are a lot of people here who didn't need 30 years of research to tell them that. Nonetheless, it turns out that this kind of work can be compelling, and Pete and I were just talking about this earlier, in trying to help us pinpoint exactly what matters and about neighborhoods and what kinds of policy prescriptions can best get us there. But in other words, to say that neighborhoods matter above and beyond family is to say that the roots of the American dream are more spatial and local, perhaps, than we previously maybe realized. Housing and neighborhoods matter, and the status quo, where too few families have real choices about where to live and where too many families of color live in our poorest communities, is simply unacceptable. As just one example, we know that growing up in a neighborhood of concentrated disadvantage reduces the verbal ability of African American children, equivalent to missing 1 year of school. There are many other examples like this and other ways we can measure the cost of the status quo. Over the past 20 years, I spent time with hundreds of families in 6 different cities, from Mobile, Alabama, to Baltimore, Chicago, Dallas, Cleveland, and now Seattle, and seeing up close how important neighborhoods can be and what happens when low-income families are trapped in our nation's most under-resourced and dangerous areas, but also what happens when families have a chance to live in and raise their children in higher opportunity neighborhoods of choice. So we know now also that moving from high poverty to low poverty neighborhoods can yield enormous gains. And I want to talk a little bit about what those look like. So we know that moving to higher opportunity neighborhoods can lead to a reduction in obesity and the probability of diabetes. And we also know, strikingly, that improving neighborhood conditions, moving to neighborhoods that are lower poverty, can improve well-being and mental health on par with best practices in antidepressant medication therapies. And a few of you know this is a point that I like to emphasize because originally it was dismissed as an insignificant finding from the Moving to Opportunity program. But I don't know how it is we expect that parents will be better parents, better partners with schools, or better employees if they don't feel good. What comes with that is a sense of what's possible. And I'm speaking here not superficially as a way of summarizing research. I'm speaking as always because on the basis of conversations I've had with parents now for nearly 20 years who've said to me that leaving some of the neighborhoods that they came from behind gave them a sense of what was possible, that it was, as one mom told me, transformative. And it isn't just the well-being in this sort of vague sense. It's specifically being able to parent, as one mother named Peaches told me, the way that I've always wanted to parent. And we'll hear more about that from the experts shortly. But we hear over and over again about what difference it makes for parents and young adults to live somewhere where people have something to live for. Accounts of being able to finally have family routines and family order because, as one mom, Tasha, told me, when we were living in the high-rises, living there was punishment enough. I didn't have any other punishment. But once we moved out to Northeast Baltimore, we were able to have family routines and have dinner. I heard many accounts about profound shifts in how parents who are part of the Baltimore program, profound shifts in how they were thinking about aspects of school, home, and neighborhood that really mattered for their families and committed to keeping their children in neighborhoods like the ones they were able to move to with the program. Importantly, parents felt they could parent the way they wanted to without the distraction of danger and chaos everywhere. For children, there are also direct effects of not only having parents who feel more efficacious, who feel like they're parenting the way they want to parent, but we now know that growing up in neighborhoods of higher opportunity, we see this both from the Moving to Opportunity results, but also national data. It also increases the chances of college attendance, earnings, the chances that children, when they become adults, will raise their own children in neighborhoods that are lower poverty. We see from both Montgomery County here and their inclusionary zoning program, and also from some work we've done here in Baltimore with children from the program, that test scores can improve as well as a result of moving to much better performing school districts, as we just heard about. I could tell you a lot more of what we learned about landlords as well. I'm thinking about Bernard, so I want to mention you again as someone who first really showed me the significance of what it meant to build relationships with landlords as part of doing these programs. But I think it's a big piece of the research that we've conducted in a number of cities and also with landlords here in the program to understand what's possible. And it was exciting to hear from the community partner from CR Maryland about what it looks like from their end. Another piece of good news about the fact that not only do we know neighborhoods matter, but we know we can do something about this is that these programs can be really cost effective, which is important when there are always the reality of housing agencies who are competing for resources. But it can be cost effective. In fact, these programs can more than pay for themselves over the long run in terms of the benefits to society, of the income and other kinds of benefits to children who are part of these programs. The counseling cost of programs like Baltimore, what we're doing in Seattle, can vary from anywhere to $2,000 to $4,000 per move, but can yield lifetime earnings gains of over $200,000. The other good news is that we can expand. I think Janae and I were just talking before the event started about the fact that Baltimore is a model for programs that are happening across the country. This is the program people look to learn how to do this work well. Housing authorities around the country are responding. We have expansion partners from all the way from Seattle, Fresno, Charlotte, Atlanta, New York, Dallas, Houston, Minneapolis, Cook County, who are interested in trying to better serve their clients. What we're doing in Seattle, which is one of the tightest housing markets in the U.S., is expanding opportunity for families through partnership with the Seattle Housing Authority and the King County Housing Authority. And admittedly, I love Baltimore and Cleveland and Dallas. It's not the most competitive. These are not the most competitive housing markets. When we were in Seattle, I thought this will be difficult, but we just did it. We being the housing authorities, the research team just got the privilege of coming along. We're about to release another version of our report on the Creating Moves to Opportunity experiment in Seattle, where over 220 families got the offer to move to neighborhoods of higher opportunity, got an offer for resources to do so. The services provided to those families were modeled on what's been done here in Baltimore. The families who in the treatment group who got the extra resources were 40% more likely to move to neighborhoods of higher opportunity than the control group in Seattle, where it was almost too expensive to put the research team up while we were there doing the work. We can expand, and the other exciting thing about what's happening in Seattle and King County is that it was a ground-up effort. This is something that housing agencies wanted to do and asked the researchers to partner with them. This can be done, although it'll require continued support and vigilance, as Betty will share with us. We just saw a bright spot in a somewhat dark legislative period of bipartisan supported funding for housing mobility in 2018 and 2019. Republican spearheaded committee supporting a housing mobility demonstration act. So that's something extraordinary. But it just shows what the partnership of good practice and research can really do. Also, we saw just around Christmas the sponsoring of the Family Stability and Opportunity Vouchers Act by Senators Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, and Chris Van Hollen here from Maryland. So there's momentum here, and there wouldn't be so much momentum without the effort of everyone in this room and many of the other partners who couldn't join us tonight. So my undergraduate students in social policy are here tonight, partly because I'm maybe giving them extra credit, but in part because this is an amazing time to be able to be here and celebrate with us. But we just got done reading the Kerner Commission report. We read American Apartheid, and Maria Creason and Kyle Crowder's new book, The Cycle of Segregation. There's a lot of work we have left to do and too many unconscionable racial inequalities. But I'm optimistic. We have an evidence-based, cost-effective, bipartisan-supported strategy to provide choice, opportunity, and mobility to families who have been denied these resources historically, resources that are so vital to human development, upward mobility, and all kinds of other dreams parents have for their children. And we have a room full of people who have fought to provide these opportunities, to whom we owe a debt of enormous gratitude. And we have a panel here today to tell us more about what it's like to be part of our local housing mobility program and to run it, and to run ground-level efforts to support integration and choice. So you don't have to take my word for it. We've got a whole bunch of experts here tonight, and I'd like to turn to the panel now and introduce you. They're going to tell us a bit more about themselves and the work they do. Thank you. I'm going to just give a brief overview of our expert panel here. So we have Baltimore Housing Mobility participants Tanika Richardson, and we have Kevin and Kendra Baines. We also have Janae Ricks, a graduate of the program. We have Pete Symbolic, the Managing Director of Operations and Program Evaluation at BRHP, and Betty Robinson, a longtime community organizer who has devoted her life to service in our communities through her work with nonprofit and grassroots organizations such as the Citizens Planning and Housing Association and Northeast Good Neighbors, among others. Let's hear it for our panel in advance. So we're going to start off with Tanika. So we've been having conversations and invited our panelists to reflect a bit on what brought them to the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program and to think a bit about the impact it's had on their lives, on their children's lives, and to tell us a bit about their journey. So take it away, Tanika.
Tanika Richardson. I am a current participant and former staff member as well as former board member of BRHP. I came on to the program in 2005. I have my two older sons here. I'm going to point y'all out. They were babies then. They are high school graduates now. But basically, what brought me to the program was, honestly, I just wanted out of my mom's house at the time. I did grow up, as well as someone else mentioned, in public housing. I grew up in Lexington Terrace, the high-rises. A lot of my family still live in the new Lexington Terrace or the new Murphy homes or whatever, because they kind of got redeveloped. But that's kind of where my whole entire childhood was. Until my mother was able to move out and get her own home. I heard about the program through word of mouth. I didn't really know too much about it, but I did apply, and at the same time I also applied to HABC public housing as well. And then coincidentally, which is funny when I tell people, I got accepted roughly to both programs at the same time. So I got accepted to HABC, and at this time we participants, we love to call the program MBQ, but it's not MBQ. So obviously I'm here, so I chose the mobility voucher, and which led me to the voucher is that the public housing development, which shall remain unnamed, that they was going to place us at, and mind you, at the time I had my two older sons were small. I had family that grew up there. Even though I was young, I was in my early 20s, I pretty much knew back then that I did not want my sons in that development. Just watching my loved ones grow up and kind of what they experienced and what they went through, I just kind of wanted something different. I took my chance with the voucher and ended up moving to Howard County, Maryland, where we still live today. And that in itself was a big step because I had no connection to Howard County whatsoever. My whole entire family was in Baltimore City. I think at the time I probably never been out of Baltimore City except to go to Six Flags, and that don't count. So to go to a whole another county was just like going to a foreign country. But nonetheless, we made it, and we're still there. And it's going on like 15 years now. I definitely consider myself a Colombian now. So, I love it. Like, I love it out there. So.
Yeah, so Tanika, I just was going to ask you to say a little more. I know in our conversations you made a comment about the enrichment activities your kids had access to as a result of moving.
My oldest son, he probably don't remember because he was such a baby then. But he actually did kindergarten year here in Baltimore City Public Schools. I did let them finish out the school year, and then I let them start off fresh the following year in Howard County. It was a big shock. The teachers pretty much looked at me and was like, did he go to school last year? And I was like, of course he went to school last year. Like, what do you mean? So they literally had to start him over from scratch. But luckily, we was in a county that had the resources and had the money to be able to kind of meet him where he was and kind of be inclusive and able to kind of get him back onto grade level, that he was able to get the IEP and get the resources and everything that he needs, and that he actually graduated on time. And both of my sons, when it comes to state testing, they were always score proficient in advance. Got on the honor roll a couple of times, with my encouragement, of course. So as far as the activities, I used to joke with them and be like, if you guys bring home one more paper, right? Because it was like every day they were coming home with different activities, and coincidentally both came home and they both wanted to do football at the same exact time in 2 different age groups. And for all my little league parents, like football teams travel and they train these kids like the NFL. So it's like really, really hard. I had to pick which Saturday I was going to be with which child, and they had the team mom would take one of them if I couldn't come that week. So it was a lot, but they pretty much did every sport known to man, literally every sport known to man. They have access to a rec center in our village that they've been going to since middle school, which I highly appreciate because it's free, right? And I don't have to worry about where they're going to go after school when I get off of work. Like, it's free. They feed the kids meals and dinner. They can stay there till 6 o'clock. They're open all year round. They do free college tours. They have enrichment activities. Yeah, it's like, my neighbors here, they live in Howard County too. So it's like really, really nice. Was able to go to driving school, like the high school had driving school there, so I didn't have to worry about too much with that. It's an abundance of jobs there. I want to shout my son out. He just got his 2nd job. So he's working 2 jobs now, you guys. So he's working 2 jobs. He just got recognized by his regional manager at his job. He's going to college. He was enlisted in the Air Force Reserve. So he's doing a lot. And again, a lot of those connections they made because the county always had resource fairs, or they was always doing something, and I make sure I take them to every single thing. And honestly, the kids probably didn't even know they were in the program until today. And they're probably like, why are you making us wear green? We're wearing our opportunity green, So this is by design. And they don't know that life, which is it's a blessing because I was able to move them while they were little. So they didn't get to experience that coming up in Baltimore City and in the environment that I came up in. So I remember telling people that when they started going to school, this is when iPads first came out, and they had iPads and they was coming home with brand new textbooks, and I was like, oh my God, y'all have textbooks? Because I remember we didn't have textbooks, and I remember my teacher used to have the Xerox copies for us and things like that. So just the little things that probably people in affluent counties take for granted was something that I noticed right off the bat.
That's amazing. Those little things are really big things, I think. And just before we move on, I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what it was like for you and your journey.
For me and my journey, it was, like I said, it was really difficult. But my mom was my support system. There were times where I did kind of feel like I wanted to kind of come back to the familiar because there was so many roadblocks. And just like, for example, when I moved to Howard County, we all know the bus system is not that great. It's not a regional bus system. It literally takes 2 hours to get from Howard County to Baltimore, which is ridiculous. And my whole life was there. So I was going to school there, all my kids' doctor's appointments there, and I was really attached to my doctor. Like, I didn't care if it took me 4 hours on a bus. But then my transmission went up on my car. So it was like, okay. So I think when my car broke down, that kind of made me re-engage my community, because it's like, okay, now I'm kind of stuck out here and I have to kind of navigate my way around. Eventually, I found, us doctors out there. I started going grocery shopping out there, because even though I lived in Howard County, I was commuting back to Baltimore City to go grocery shopping, because because Columbia did not have the food that I was used to. And I was like, what is going on? Where's the whole milk? Where is the oodles and noodles? Like, I was like literally looking for all this. But back then, I didn't know it was unhealthy food, right? It was kind of like I was on a budget. This is what I was used to eating, and my grocery stores didn't have it. It wasn't until I started kind of seeing those things. And at the time I was going to school, I was at Baltimore City Community College. I had just got my GED, and I just knew I was going to be a nurse. Because almost every woman in my family is a nurse. I took a course, an elective in community health. So it was kind of like I was living it, but it was like until I took that course, I didn't know what those terms were. So I didn't know what disparities of health mean and equality and all these different things. And I was like, wait a minute. So it's like the little light bulb started going off, and I started paying attention. And I actually changed my major to public health and transferred to the University of Maryland in 2009. And then I graduated with my bachelor's in community health in 2012. So basically my whole undergrad year, all my papers were about the Baltimore Mobility Program. And all my professors loved it. They was like, oh, this is such a good program. They were like super rooting for me. I mean, as a single mom, it was times I didn't have a babysitter. I had to have exams. They knew my college campus better than me at, probably at a young age, because they would come to me to take exams. The professors would watch them for me while I would take my exams so I could, get my degree. So that was in 2012. Of course, I started loving school for some strange reason. And I actually went back and I actually got my master's in public health too from the same university. So again, it's just weird because I started out with I'm going to be a nurse, and then I'm not necessarily like a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. So it's kind of like I wanted to, do nursing, and it's kind of just like God was like, I need you over here, right? So it's kind of like naturally just came into policy, and then the beauty of it is that I was able to work with BRHP and see the work that the staff do. And until I worked there, I didn't realize how much work they did, and I see a lot of current and former staff members here. The work is definitely appreciated. I don't think people realize how big the program is for a staff of less than 50 people. And everyone there works really hard, and most people kind of wear multiple hats to really run the program and kind of get it done. And I actually got to see that kind of firsthand being a counselor too.
Oh, that's great. How about another round of applause for all that? That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Tamika. So, Kendra and Kevin, who wants the mic first?
My name is Kendra Baines, and I actually came to the program at about the end of 2015, along with my husband. I believe he's directly behind me, with our 7 children at the time. We have 9 children now. And at the time, we lived in Baltimore City, East Side. I kind of got into the program kind of like word of mouth. I saw my sister-in-law was also, and it was MBQ, I believe, at the time. The biggest challenge for my husband and I was just trying to find, adequate housing with enough space for my large family. And that was very challenging because, they want an arm and leg. It just was too much. So, and not only that, also a place where I felt safe for my children to play and stuff like that. So it was really challenging. So I heard about some programs, public housing, Section 8, and I heard through my sister-in-law about BRHP. So I just said, hey, I'm just going to apply for whatever I can apply for. So I applied for BRHP and kind of forgot about it. Applied for public housing, kind of forgot about it. Public housing got to us first. We went in, but the thing is about public housing is that you just got to go wherever they put you. They wanted to put us in Cherry Hill Homes, and, I'm grateful for whatever. I'm not trying to sound ungrateful, but it was just really, really, really cramped and small. And my son, one of my sons is 6'8". I have a huge, big boys. I have 8 boys and 1 girl. And all of my sons are over 6 feet tall, every single one of them. For all of us trying to cram into Cherry Homes, they were really, really, really small. And then on top of that, I'm concerned about the neighborhood. My husband and I checked it out, but we just decided not to go along with it. And then, it just didn't work. So, but like a month later, I get a letter in the mail for BRHP. I was like, okay, well, let's, see what this is about. So we just went on and went in and just went head first. The greatest thing that I believe that I really, really appreciate about this program is they don't just take you and throw you into a home. It goes much further than that. There are preparations. They teach you how to be responsible. They give you worksheets and workshops and stuff like that. And the biggest thing for us was to teach us a workshop on finances. When my husband and I started the program, both of our credit mine was 0. I didn't have any credit. And his credit was okay, fair credit. So the financial workshop taught us what good credit was, how to obtain and then maintain good credit, and just taught us ways how we didn't even know we could dispute things on our credit report. We had no idea about any of these things, so we were able to learn a lot of good information that in turn allowed him and I both to improve our credit score by over 100 points. Mine went skyrocketed because I didn't have any. So my credit score is like 700 plus right now. So it helped us, just gain knowledge and then how to put that knowledge into practice. I did want to say, as far as my children, I homeschool my children, and I've always homeschooled them. So I never really had a problem with the public school system, but that's why I homeschooled, to be honest, because I didn't want to put them in Baltimore City public schools. It was just no way I was going to do it. So that's why I decided to homeschool in the first place. My biggest problem or concern was my children's safety. One thing that I never allowed them to do was to go outside and play. They couldn't even go outside and play. I let them play in the house every now and again, and I'm out there watching them like a hawk all the time. But then we didn't even have adequate space for them to play. We had a front sidewalk, it's no front yard, and then it was on a busy street. And then our backyard was probably, it was very small, just say that. It was very small, and it was really nowhere for them to play. So I was very concerned about safety, and I was very concerned about, just the environment. It's a high crime environment most of the time we lived in, because that's what we could afford.
Kev, did you want to jump in and add anything here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The program is a complete miracle for me and my family. Being a young African-American male growing up, it was really tough for me, growing up in a certain type of demographic. I learned about the program through my wife, because she's the greatest thing ever happened to me, let me say that. And yes, greatest thing here it is, I'm out working every day, and any type of help that can come in the household, I'm grateful for that. She kind of let me know that she put in for some programs, and I was like, oh okay, didn't really expect anything to jump off. When the programs came through, I could have did the peanut butter and jelly sandwich dance. I was like, it was really, I heard about the program through my wife, and the biggest thing about this wonderful program is that it alleviated so much stress off of my life, because, me and my wife early on, we've been together for 22 years. We've been married for 22 years, thank God. The biggest thing is, we chose early on in our marriage for her to homeschool, because she told me how she felt, and I also agreed with her, how she felt about the Baltimore public school system. And so I said, I'll do whatever I have to do. If I have to work 3 jobs, I'll do it, whatever I have to do. And so it was really rough for us. We lived in certain, a certain demographic neighborhoods. We started off in Emerson Village. Then we moved from Emerson Village to Lexington Street. And you just kind of make things work, and you kind of just live on and make the best out of every situation. When this program came through, it was such a blessing because it freed up so much stress off of me. It's freed up so many finances. I didn't have to worry about being backed up, on my bills and, stuff like that. It just freed up so much, for me. I remember the house that we're living in now, being in the construction field, wiring up houses. And I would go to homes that were so beautiful, even down to the smell of the home. It smelled like fresh wood and drywall. And it would do something to my mentals every time I took a sniff of the house. I looked into homes and I looked around the homes, and in my mind I say, this would be great for me, this would be great for my family. But in my mind I would say, this is unobtainable. I'll never obtain this. Thinking about the children and how you want to do better for your children and how you want to do better for the family, and just so much pressure. And so what I love about the program is that it made what was unobtainable to me obtainable. And I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And the impact that it has had on my children is off the chain. Off the chain. We could go out in the backyard, we could throw the football, to where's though in the city. You can't do that. Where we were living, we just couldn't do it. We go from, the milk crate in the alley, playing basketball, to, just a basketball goal in the backyard where we can play, and that is just so much blessing to my life. And I really, really, really appreciate the BRHP program. It's been such a blessing to me.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Great. So Jana, tell us, our program graduate, so tell us a little bit about your story, and maybe even some of the skills that you still use today that you learned in the program.
So I came in the program the end of 2014. I actually got my place in 2015, but I recently just graduated. I purchased my home in Catonsville. Thank you, Lord. But what happened was I already had moved to Baltimore County, and the rent was $1,100 a month. Me being a single mother, it was just me and my son at first, and I was trying to figure out how long I can keep paying this rent that's going to keep going up, not just based on my income, it was just going up. So I heard about the program through a mutual friend. Then I did my own research, so I applied. So the first time the letter came, I missed the appointment. I got on that phone, I blew BRHP up. I cried like a baby until they responded back to me. So when they responded, I was jumping around. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah. The letter came. So I went in full force with the program. So my son actually did kindergarten all the way up to 3rd grade in the city schools. So when I transferred him to county schools, he had to redo the 3rd grade. Whereas though now I have my daughter, she came up in county schools. She's in the advanced 4th grade class. So awesome. The program helped me because I drive the school bus. So I'm getting everybody else's kids to school on time, and I have to worry about my own. Thank you, Lord, for the neighbors and the help of the school, the students, their parents, helping me backwards and forwards, transferring, and helping me with the kids. They taking my kids to the football games and their practices and stuff, and I'm meeting them at the practice because I don't get off until 6 o'clock. So I'm meeting them at the games. What happened was just by the neighbors and the help that I had from the different diverse community, it just helped me so much. What I did was I'm using the chart for the saving chart, that $1 a week. If you add it up, $1,400 almost at the end of the year. That works. So I'm teaching my kids that. So we put our money in the budget. We put it in the pot every time. So what I did was I worked on my credit, and I had a goal going in. I always said I wanted to purchase a house for my kids. So that's what my mother wanted to do for me. She was a single mother. So I said, if I can purchase a house for my kids, along the way eventually, maybe they can become landlords or something. So now I'm investing in me and my kids so they can do this later. I got my credit score together, and we're here. Yeah. So I jumped around. I said, thank you, Jesus. So what I did was I started calling the credit people, everything that I had on my account and my credit, and I just called them. I said, I heard my pastor say it before, if you don't face it, you can't fix it. So I stood in front of it and I faced it. So I just kept calling them, and I was telling them, well, look, I only have like $20 a month. Can you take that? And at first they were saying like, no. But I was like, okay, well, if I give up $20, at least the bill going down. They're going to stop chasing me. So they did. So at the end of the year, what I started doing was I started calling and asking, can I settle out? So when I started settling out, where the bill probably was $500, it ended up being maybe $250. So with your tax money, you can take that $250 and the ways to save. I was saving money in the pot with the ways to save chart, and it worked. Thank you, Lord. It worked. It worked.
So it makes you wonder, how does the program do this? right? How does the program work? And so we get a chance to talk to Pete to tell us a bit more about the program and everybody who is helping families accomplish all of these amazing things. So tell us a little bit about the program, Pete, and where you see things heading.
The primary goal of the work we do is to empower the women and families like these to access communities from which they've been excluded traditionally, and to allow them and their children to thrive in those communities, to remove as many barriers as we can to make that possible, to position them to be successful in their new home, and to support them as they make that transition. So our program has evolved over time. So I'll speak to the current design, but many of these elements have been present throughout the history of the nearly 2 decades history of the program. By far, what sets us apart from other programs is the counseling that we provide to families. And that counseling is done in 3 major phases. So we have a pre-move counseling, housing search assistance, and post-move counseling. The pre-move counseling has 2 major elements. It's a workshop series and then a one-on-one counseling session that one of our counselors does with the family. And in the workshop program, as you all mentioned, you learn about banking, budgeting, credit repair, how to be have a good relationship with your landlord, how to keep up your home, all things that are preparing the family to be successful in their new home and in their housing search. And then on the one-on-one session, it really is trying to work to identify the goals, or set a plan to break the barriers that they might be facing in leasing in the private market. And so if it's a credit issue, setting a concrete plan with steps to address those issues to prepare the family to lease a home. So once the client completes the pre-move counseling phase, they receive their voucher, and then the housing search process begins. And as we all know, searching for a new home can be really difficult and is often you face trade-offs, and you have to really decide what's important to you and your family. Our counselors help navigate that process. So when a family receives their voucher, they're given referrals to 3 homes. Those homes are pre-screened for affordability. They come from some of our property partners who list their units with us. And that's a good jump-off point for that family. Some families know exactly the neighborhood they want to be in or the school that they want to be in, and so they might not rely on our counselors much. They really have just honed in on where they want to be. But for some of our families, they need a little more intensive support through the search process. They'll work with the counselors to narrow the search, identify specific homes or neighborhoods that meet their needs. And to generally navigate the process of finding and ultimately securing and leasing a home. And then once our families are in those homes, our post-counselors engage with them. And so they'll do a home visit shortly after the family leases in the new home, and then every 6 months after that. And really the purpose of that is to help the family acclimate, identify any issues that might be a challenge long-term. It might potentially jeopardize their tenancy or even their assistance, and really try to connect the family to the resources necessary to thrive in their new home and their new community. The post-move supports can really extend far beyond the 2 years, though, if a family's moving or if they have any issues that come up with landlord-tenant issues, community issues, anything like that. Our post-counselors are there to support them.
It's amazing to do all of this work one-on-one. And I know you guys in 2018 and 2019 were at full capacity with over 4,300 households assisted to date.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yes. So what happens next? What's the next phase for BRHP?
There's a lot of exciting things in the next phase, I think. We've just started, as you mentioned, we sort of leased up to full capacity, which was, a Herculean task. Over 5 years, actually over the life of the program, but especially in the last 5 years. We are now providing counseling to some Housing Authority of Baltimore City families through another Thompson settlement initiative, but that's the first group of families we're counseling who are outside of our own program, our own waiting list, and so that's really exciting. We just were awarded a Kresge Foundation grant to, again, work with the Housing Authority of Baltimore City to implement or to get to an implementation of the Healthy Children Voucher demonstration program. And that's going to couple voucher assistance with mobility counseling for families who have a medical need related to their environment, their community, or their home. And so hopefully, that'll be in 2021, hopefully working on that. But it's a great partnership with the Housing Authority and then also health partners, medical providers, and public health officials. Get the details of that program. We have we're working, and this was mentioned earlier, with the Regional Project-Based Voucher Initiative. Most of the time we refer to these in acronyms, and that doesn't work necessarily here. That's a collaboration of 6 housing authorities in the region, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council and BRHP. The housing authorities have all pooled 150 vouchers to create long-term affordable units in areas throughout the region. And those will help to leverage the creation of other units that are affordable at varying levels of income. So really exciting there. And we're actually going to be doing the counseling for those families and also the voucher administration. So again, sort of a next step for BRHP, but an exciting one. Another really exciting effort that we're engaged in, and Adria mentioned this, is the Mobilityworks Consortium, and we have a few of our partners here from that group. That is a group that's providing technical assistance to other nonprofits and housing authorities throughout the nation who are interested in starting or expanding their mobility program or bolstering it. And so that's the Housing Choice Partners, Inclusive Community Project, BRHP, Poverty Race Research Action Council, and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, who are undertaking that initiative. And what's interesting there, I think, is with the rollback of the fair housing rules and regulations that we've seen over the last 3 years, there is still excitement about housing mobility. And I think, the research of Raj Chetty, certainly your research, Stephanie, has really changed the narrative. And, now people are thinking about housing mobility simply on its merits and really, excited about doing it for those reasons. So we're excited about that as well. And then lastly, I'll just mention, it's last and certainly not least, after the years of program growth that we've experienced, we're at a little calmer state. We're really trying to think about how we can deepen the services that we provide to our families through identifying unmet needs, broadening our partnerships, and developing internal capacity. We hope that over the next several years, we're able to help families achieve their own economic goals, be it a transition to home ownership, increasing their income, saving for a car or college. Empowering our families to achieve these goals will really help fulfill the promise that their new community holds.
That's amazing. That's great, Pete. It's not enough just to run a successful mobility program, but the future is bright. Thanks for all of your hard work. But it takes even more effort than just the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership and the mobility program. Betty, tell us a bit more about what you see and reflecting on all of this and your work on the ground, and a bit more about, I think, the responsibility that we all have to carry forward some of these efforts in our own communities.
So the first thing I wanted to just share with you, I'll share a little bit about Northeast Good Neighbors, which is how I got involved in the Baltimore aspect of this housing fight. But I'm sitting here listening to the families and sharing their stories, and I'm thinking of the lost potential in our city and our country. When we marginalize people and we keep people in situations such as the unsafe neighborhoods, negative, bad schools, et cetera. So I think about, one of the questions I had is why do we as a people need to continually work for others to, or for everyone to have safe neighborhoods, good schools, and decent housing. And so I want to have people just think about that. Why is it that in our country we can't make can't find a way to create this for every family, for every person? I wanted to, first of all, thank Lawrence Lanahan, who wrote this book, The Lines Between Us, and he's here tonight because he brought me back to 20 years ago when a group of us formed in Northeast Baltimore when, because of the Thompson settlement, 25 families from public housing were going to move into Northeast Baltimore. So just as I was shocked, I got my start in organizing in the civil rights movement as a young person finishing college. I saw black students not being able to sit at lunch counters in the South, and I was shocked. I didn't think, that wasn't the country that I'd been taught about. I grew up in New York. My parents were working class, but they both got education, so we lived in a kind of a middle class area. But I did not believe that black students could not sit at lunch counters. And so I got involved in the student movement and the civil rights movement, ended up leaving graduate school and going south to work for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which we're celebrating our 60th anniversary convening this year. Now, SNCC hasn't existed since the late 60s, but we have a SNCC Legacy Project, which is really lifting up the need for organizing and the fact that I like to refer to this when I talk about organizing. If you think about the things that we have possibilities for. I sometimes say, well, where did we get Social Security? Where did we get that? Well, people organized for that. Where did we get the minimum wage? Where did we get, et cetera, you fill in the blank. It's because people took initiative and got out there and figured out we need a policy change, we need to advocate for this, we need to organize, we need to demonstrate, whatever it took. So I suspect it was Barbara Samuels who called us together in Northeast. I don't really remember all the details. It was in 2000. It was just after O'Malley became the mayor. And we learned that public housing residents were going to be moved into Northeast. I lived in Northeast, right off Harford Road. There was a meeting at the senior center up Harford Road, and it was I got there late, so there was overflowing, and there were all these vehement white people, anti-black white people, who were saying we don't want these people in our neighborhood. Section 8, it's bad. This is horrible. It's going to destroy our neighborhood. And I'm standing there. I'm like, what's going on? Well, I mean, I was literally shocked. So one thing led to another, and I suspect it was Barbara, and Barbara could fill in if you chat with her later. We met at the Community Mediation Center on Greenmount, a group of us, and there we met this woman, Caroline Queel, who actually lived next door to a vacant house, and she learned through, I won't go into all the details, but anyway, she learned through a series of events that one of the public housing residents might move next to her. But she was at the meeting, and she then met Ike Neal, who was mentioned earlier as one of the plaintiffs in the Thompson suit, and she was shocked to learn that he worked. He and his wife both worked. They were raising their kids. They were a stable family. I mean, again, busting the stereotypes, right, which is one of the things that always we have to do. But again, raising my kids as a single mom, I knew how hard it is to bust that stereotype of the single mom cannot do it. But anyway, one of the things we did in Northeast is we organized a petition drive. We got the petitions to Mayor O'Malley. There was a big public meeting at what was then middle school. I'm blocking on the name. It was Hamilton. I guess it was Hamilton Middle. We passed out stickers, good neighbors come in all colors, and we stood firm. Most of us were white, few African Americans, but we said, no, public housing residents are welcome in our neighborhood. So then one of the things that makes me reflect on is, what was the fear? The Northeast had maybe 30,000, 40,000 households. What was the fear? 25 families moving in? Was it fear of black people? Was it fear of change? Was it fear of poor people? What was it? What was the resistance? And why was it so difficult for people to be open and say, welcome? We know that you have not existed in great circumstances, etc. The other thing we were doing, and I just want to reflect on this, we at CPHA, Citizens Planning and Housing, which was a pretty dynamic, robust organization at the time, we were reading things like the segregation tax, which talked about choice in neighborhoods and how African American homeowners were taxed because they lived in segregated neighborhoods, and people were not interested in buying houses there. So that was one thing we were reading. We were reading the David Rusk housing policy is school policy. We were doing a lot of regional organizing, and so the work of moving people from the city to opportunities, to neighborhoods of opportunities, was something that was embraced by CPHA. I'm going to go fast forward. After the Northeast Good Neighbors work, the work that I then did was supporting the residents who lived north of Hopkins, of the medical campus, who were having their houses taken by eminent domain. And so we fought for, first we had to fight for fair relocation policies, then we fought for people to be able to have a right to return. We also fought for mixed income neighborhoods. And that was really hard to put that message out there. Mixed income neighborhoods, who ever thought of that? And that, again, lots of resistance to that. And so if any of you live in East Baltimore or near Hopkins Medical Campus, you can see, you know, that project had a lot of challenges because the housing market tanked in 2007, and that was kind of the height of the project. You know, the only thing message I can leave you with is the need for continual organizing, and this is, of course, 2020 is a time where we need deep organizing so that we don't slide ever further backward in all kinds of areas. And the fight for fair, decent housing as a human right has to continue forward. And also, I want to give credit to BHRP because you're an unsung organization. You're an unsung organization. I mean, I learned a lot tonight about the work that you've been doing in the trenches, and so I applaud you all, and thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts.
So do we have some time for questions? Okay, who's got the mic running out in their audience?
Hi, I just want to say that my housing policy, I grew up in the School of Housing Preservation, and tonight I went to the School of Housing Mobility, and it was such an honor to hear from the residents. And the thread that I heard between all of the stories was a story about empowerment and how housing mobility, but also the counseling that comes with it, is about empowerment, whether it's empowerment to pursue your own educational aspirations or to pursue how you want to raise your family and pursue buying a house. That's so important, and that I think is critical. But that's also something that Mr. King spoke about, which it's not about an either-or proposition of preservation or place-based services or mobility services. It has to be an and of course everyone is competing for limited resources in this environment. The thing that I learned in the School of Preservation and the School of Mobility is that what is critical is the counseling and the services that underlie both of those types of housing affordability and stability and community engagement. And so I just want to thank you guys for telling your stories. And Betty, if you want to join the Chevy Chase DC community listserv to talk about maybe a little more integration, I would be happy to give you the email address. So thank you.
Hello, my name's Vina. I'm part of Professor DeLuca's class. We learn a lot about the program or the housing program in class, and so it's really interesting and really amazing to hear how it works in practice. And I guess I was just really interested in hearing more about the obstacles or difficulties that you face while trying to integrate into your communities. I know that Miss Betty, you were talking about the backlash that was faced by these individuals who are trying to move in. So I guess I was kind of interested in hearing more about how you overcame these challenges and what you faced.
In my years in a program, I will say I probably was one of the fortunate ones where I didn't have too many challenges. Well, quick funny story. The current house that I'm in now, 2 houses down, I really wanted that house because it had a backyard, it had a playground in the backyard, and the backyard was fenced. My house didn't have a backyard. So I remember both houses were on the market at the same time, similar Timmons Bonds, got good credit, had the money. And the landlord was going to rent to me. You know, I presented myself very well. And that's another thing, too, that we didn't get to touch on as a voucher holder when we're out doing our housing search. It's almost like a job interview. It's kind of like you have to interview for the home, you know, because of the stigma of being a voucher holder. But nonetheless, he was like totally going to rent to me. And I kind of feel like, even though I didn't really fight it too much, that once I said I had a voucher, he kind of backed out a little bit. Because it was kind of like, oh, well, I have another family that's kind of from out of town, and I think I'm going to rent to them because they put the deposit in. Whatever excuse he gave me, it was 9 years ago. I don't remember word for word, but I remember he kind of fell back a little bit. I was like, okay, fine. I just started to proceed with the other house that didn't have the fenced backyard. But this landlord was really nice, and he was new to the program. He didn't know anything. Not just new to the program, new to being a Section 8 landlord, period. Like, he didn't know anything. Him and his wife was, like, really nice. Like, they invited me into their home. I'm a Democrat, just off record. So I remember going to their house. This is back when Obama was running for office, and I just remember seeing all these McCain signs. I was like, oh my God, I was like, where am I going? You know, so I was like, this man that invited me to his house, I didn't know what I was walking into, but his family was so nice. And I literally had to walk him through the HAP contract and explain to him what the HAP contract was. Like, we was faxing stuff to the office, like literally there from his dining room. And I just say that to say that I was fortunate enough that I'm able to, you know, I was able to present myself and able to walk the landlord kind of through that packet where other clients probably can't do that. So the fact that we have counselors that can jump in and help clients do that is a blessing in itself. But fast forward, after my RCA and stuff is in for my house, I get a call from the landlord. This couple fell through. And he's like, oh, you know, if you're still interested, I can take your application. I was like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I actually signed the lease for the house 2 doors down for you, but good luck, you know. So that was just kind of like my little karma. And, yeah, and I'm still there. And I know he sees me. He probably like, is that the same young lady? I'm like, yes, I'm still here. My landlord loves me. And I'm never leaving, you know. So, like, he's, like, really nice. Like, I love him. He doesn't bother me at all, which is perfect because you have, and sometimes you have that, you have landlords that kind of want to micromanage you in a unit. And that home, the fact that he trusts me with that home, again, never been a Section 8 landlord. The home been in their family for 30 years. You know, they came, I think, over one time when I first moved in, and they was like, oh, you decorated it like really nice and things like that. So I think that kind of helped kind of alleviate that stress a little bit. That's just kind of my one little caveat story that I do have that I like to tell people, because I know he was like, oh, no, she got a voucher.
First off, I'd like to thank the panel for your courage, for being up there tonight, and for telling your story. Let's give them a round of applause, please. And as for the question, I'd like to ask Kevin and Kendra, tell us about the kids, their experiences, the things that you had to help them struggle through, and their successes.
Honestly, when it comes to our children, I don't think they really had anything negative really happen. The biggest experience for them was, I would say, joy. I really would have to say joy, because my husband and I used to drive around, like he said, we used to drive around and dream of little houses. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to live here? And wouldn't it be nice to live there? When we started to move, when we drove down the street, my daughter was like, hold up. Is this is where we're gonna live? I mean, she was just like, could not believe it, you know. So I don't think they really had anything negative, you know. My children and I, we homeschool, so we have plenty of space. I mean, I have a whole huge basement, which the majority of the basement is my classroom. We have a huge backyard. They can go outside. We have recess outside, jumping on the trampoline, playing basketball, or whatever we want to do. You know, so I think they had a pretty good transition. I have 4 older children. You know, they were older, so they kind of just fit in. They just kind of go with the flow. But then I have 5 babies, 10 and under. And they, you know, kind of just, you know, they just kind of doing really well. So I don't think we really had any negative experiences.
No, not at all. No. It has been no negative experiences for our children. You know, the multicultural atmosphere, they love it. Looking outside and seeing Bambi walk up the street. Wonderful.
No, really.
Absolutely. You know, and it's just been wonderful.
How about one more round of applause? You want to say? Okay, go ahead. I think Betty wants to jump in.
I just wanted to piggyback on something that Jana said earlier. She said, if you don't face it, you can't fix it. To me, this housing insufficiency for families is a big something we have to face as a country, as a city, as an organization, and if we don't face it, we can't fix it. So my challenge to everybody in the audience is think about what part, besides, and many of you I know already play a role in your neighborhoods and your communities, but how can you step up a little further, take a step way out there, take a few risks to fight harder for housing, decent housing. Housing is a human right.
Thank you. So we got some homework to do.
But just to piggyback off of her, I currently am doing something, so I'm in the best rooms I can be in. I see a lot of familiar faces that I already know. I unfortunately did leave. I'm still a part of the BHP. You know, it's like Ravens. Once you're a Raven forever. I'm a BRHP family member forever. But I did get the opportunity to be a senior fellow in my area of focus is housing. And I'm with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. So a lot of you probably know my boss. And I see some familiar faces from the Home Ec. I see you guys at the Justice Center, yes. One of the projects that I'm working on that I'm going to be the lead author on is a Maryland Housing Report. So I really could use you guys' help. Definitely connect with me after this. I know things from the, kind of first in line, kind of living the experience. But one of the things that they're going to allow me to do this year is to analyze the Maryland budget and the history and kind of look at it from a racial equity lens and connect with different organizations and come up with some policy recommendations that we can bug our legislators with. So what better person to do that than someone who I literally kind of went through every stage, right? Definitely, you guys can connect with me if you have some tips or some articles that you would like to share with me, even from our landlords as well. Definitely connect with me after, please. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Tanika. So we have a closing remarks from Josh Sivan, the Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of the BRHP. Last but definitely not least.
And I want to thank our panelists, Stephanie, Kevin, Kendra, Tanika, Jaya, Pete, and Betty. Really inspiring words, and you have to stay up here with me to close this all out because we need you. We mentioned what we're going to do for the civil rights of the 21st century, and you are our heroes, our true heroes, civil rights heroes of the 21st century. So one more round of applause for them. So it takes all of us to combat discriminatory policies and attitudes wherever they show up, whether they be in affordable housing, land use and zoning, school redistricting, or in the allocation of public resources, and to create communities where all of our families can thrive. When I was with Andy and Ryan and Barbara and working on the settlement, it's really amazing to see a lawsuit that starts with defendants and the judges all coming together 25 years later to celebrate our accomplishment. And it goes through, really, I was remembering that the HUD lawyers didn't really think this was going to work. So they said, maybe rather than us trying to enforce this, we'll just give you a nonprofit to work, and the nonprofit will fail, but it won't be on us. But lo and behold, we brought together everybody here, and we built something, and we had amazing families that took us up on this offer, and we implemented this settlement, and now we have a nonprofit that can build together and thrive into the next work. As Pete said, BRHP looks to move forward and build on the legacy of Thompson by enhancing services and supports to families, sharing our best practices with others, activating partnerships here in Baltimore to advance housing opportunity, justice, and equity efforts, and promoting strategies that bring about the opportunity transformation of more areas within the region to become opportunity areas to realize better futures for all of our families. We hope that you leave here tonight feeling well informed about the tremendous work that BRHP is doing. We hope that you leave here energized by the impact that the Housing Mobility Program has for our families, and equipped to lend your support towards fair housing solutions in our wider community. Thanks again to all of our participants, to our honorees, Sierra of Maryland and John King, Secretary King, to the members of the Board of Directors, to the BRHP staff led by our amazing, newish still, Executive Director, Adria Crutchfield, and then to all of our families who have stayed with us and built with an amazing staff. And we hope that we will continue to provide support as we go forward. And we look forward to staying connected with you through Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all the other platforms we'll invent soon. Thank you and good night.